In the snow is a small group of men, black and white through the eye of the motion picture camera. Their steps are heavily trudging, their lips are sealed. If they've uttered words, the deaf and dumb camera has failed to capture it. If they've talked, we'll never hear. They walk in the whirling snow deep in thoughts. They're all in the same thoughts. They don't need to speak about it because they all share it. The thoughts and the memories have tied them together with blood-red velvet bands. Even though they're discouraged, they work surely and purposefully. They work while the snow's blowing. It's the only thing they can do, and they know that it's right. Nothing else is meaningful. They can do so little, and their act is so simple, but so grand, so important. The grave is invisible in the snowdrift. They wipe the snow off a grave ornament and look with empty eyes into the ground. Silently they stand, as still as time, in the frozen little graveyard. A well-known smell of carcass is carried with the wind from the solitary whaling station where the old men live who understood him the best. Obliviously, Query merrily wags his tail, one single dog. Then they're seen taking a sledge up the hill. They haul it in harnesses as in the old days, while the dog runs beside them. Up unto the top of the cliff they pull it, up to the place where the monument is to stand. The mountains are ragged in the background and the sea is nearby. They work in its shadow, quietly, purposefully, in the snow. They build it with their hands and with spades, a simple gift but grand, and they give it to him, the man they know that they loved. And so they're finished, proud and satisfied with their work. They pose in front of the monument before the eye of the camera, a blurry group of men on the elderly film, a small remnant. Buenos Aires was standing with cheers in its harbour, and the men on the ship waved their hats to the crowd. The puffs coming up from the ship's funnel were dancing in the breeze with the waves and the flags. From the little engine room, purring warm sounds rose merrily as if the ship itself was feeling happy on its first journey. The sea lay open, and beyond it lay the goal of their dreams, the picture in their imagination. Not many thought about the war. Not many thought about the shock that had shaken the old world out of its bed and thrown it into the dawn of a new era. The ship was too beautiful to give them sad thoughts. The adventure was too exciting and too great. The men on board were heroes. Britain was lying scorned in the trenches and the battlefields, and these men were among the last who could make her honour bloom once again. Scott was dead, but the dream of British success was not buried with him. Yet one more adventure would last until the old world was blown to pieces in the shell fire. Endurance was the last ship of its kind, the youngest daughter in the fading family, the last name on the list of heroic polar ships. She was a wooden vessel, made for the white water of the poles, pretty, majestic, with her sails shining in the sun. Her warm black hull, her tall, proud masts, the net of the rigging made a glistening picture for the eyes of those who had crowded in the harbour of Buenos Aires. The year was 1914, and she was the vessel that took Shackleton to Antarctica. Shackleton was walking restlessly back and forth over her deck, while the dogs were barking around him. He seemed to be in serious thoughts about the expedition, seemed to ponder and plan. He was quiet, even though he knew that he could not fail. He knew it then, before anything had happened. He had joined them in a haste in Buenos Aires, busy to the end with preparations in England. Hastily he'd arrived, and most of them didn't know him yet. Alexander Macklin, who'd been feeding the dogs, could remember how he'd seen him walk over the deck in his crooked old hat. He didn't know then how deeply he'd loved that man one day. He didn't know then how mighty comradeship could be. Back then he had the experiences of a baby and was a very young man compared to the person he would be 2 years later. 2 long years which he was still unaware of, would trudge through the snow on the pack ice before he saw civilization again. But he didn't think very much about Shackleton, because his eyes were mostly glancing at the southern horizon. It was the expedition he thought about, the big adventure. He was part of it. He was taking part in the last great polar journey. He was one of those who would win the last great prize. They would cross the Antarctic continent. They would do a journey that was longer than Scott's and longer than Amundsen's, and they would become greater heroes. Macklin remembered how he thought the future seemed bright. He remembered how happy and healthy those faces were that one day would smile in his heart forever. He remembered how proud he was, and even though the temperature was falling more and more every day, he was hot inside because of the overwhelming feeling of expectation. For a very long time Alexander Macklin had been dreaming of becoming an explorer, ever since he was in medical school and had found Nansen's book about feats in the north. Had the dream been eating him from the inside. Now he was a doctor with experiences from the sea, and he'd been chosen from 5,000 to go with Shackleton to the white wilderness of the south. Now he was there, and saw his dream come true. The expectations were as bright as the snow. But the cold was fierce that year, and the pack was unforgiving. They'd sailed through the floes, splitting them with a ship as a ram, successfully. But the ice was forever the winner of the white warfare of the south. Frozen, the Endurance was stuck in the Weddell Sea, still, while the ice held her body tightly, unwilling to let go. The magical Antarctic mainland was soon out of sight. The dream disappeared together with the seals. Macklin would always remember